Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. We'll be starting less than a minute. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So last time we talked about the fate of humanity in as portrayed in the Buddhist scriptures, and we're going to broaden the focus for today's talk and look at the uh, fate of the universe as it's seen in the unfolding of long epochs of time. To make sense of what follows, first we should briefly review the physical structure of the universe as presented in the Buddhist texts. The basic unit of the world is what's called a chakrawala. It's usually translated as a world system, which consists of Mount Sindaru in the center, surrounded by alternate rings of ocean and mountain, and finally a great ocean around the whole, in which are four islands, very small relative to the total system. And humanity lives on the southern half of the southern island. So we're in a minor corner of the Chakrawala. There's said to be an infinite number of Chakrawalas spread out on a two-dimensional plane. Each Chakrawala is surrounded by a final wall of mountains made of iron, and these touch up against each other so that, like wagon wheels, is one text says, that leaving a hollow, roughly triangular space in between. So you have this horizontal spread along the plane of the world, of these world systems or Chakrawalas. This is not really the equivalent of the modern idea of a solar system, because it, for one thing, they're not spread out three-dimensionally, but only two-dimensionally. And the sun is not at the center. The sun is a relatively minor body that rotates around the central mountain, which is the main feature in each Chakrawala. Each Chakrawala has the identical basic layout, the mountain and the rings and the oceans. So that's a horizontal picture. Vertically, above the Chakrawala are the various heaven worlds, and beyond the sensual heavens are the Brahma worlds. And the Brahma worlds can extend over a multitude of Chakrawalas. There's no clear universally agreed system for the exact proportions. In my book on Buddhist cosmology, I've laid out three diagrams representing three models of how the Brahma worlds are situated. And even those three involved a certain amount of conjecture to try to make sense of the conflicting texts. But what we can, to simplify, what we can say is that uh, each successively higher Brahma level of the four, equivalent to the four jhanas, the four main strata of Brahma worlds, each one incorporates a greater number. For example, in one of the models, the first Brahma level has 1,000 chakawalas beneath it. The second um, Brahma level will have 1,000 of those units below it, so 1,000, so on to the fourth. Another model has one first Brahma level associated with each chakrawala, and then 10,000 of those, and then below the second level, and 10,000 of those below the third level, and the infinity of the whole universe below the fourth level. But the general principle is that each Brahma level has a number of world systems below it, and increasingly as you go higher, it will include the lower Brahma levels and a number of those, and a great number of the chakawalas. I had to make this digression into the physical structure so that the various levels of destruction will make sense. So having that image of the universe in mind and focus on the idea of the chakrawala, we'll look at the extent of time involved is called a mahakappa for the entire age of one world system from beginning to end. It's a mahakappa. And we don't have numbers. We aren't given numbers. The Buddhists specifically said the length of a mahakappa cannot be easily reckoned in years or hundreds of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of koti of years. It's not really easily expressed. But then he gives a metaphor to express the idea that this is a really, really long period of time. He said if you had a block of solid granite, a cube, a kappa on a side, that's 7.5 kilometers on the side, solid granite, and a sparrow flew by once every 100 years and brushed it lightly with its tail feathers, that block of granite would be worn down to nothing before the end of the kappa. So here we see first the first really big difference with the old Western cosmology and the pre-modern, where the whole extent of the age of the world was considered to be 6,000 years. So this is much closer to a modern view that measures time in billions of years. We're talking here probably even longer stretches of time in the old Buddhist model. The ancient Indians were quite fond of really large numbers. They didn't shy away from large magnitudes. The kappa, the mahakappa, can be divided into four sub-kappas. There's an empty kappa, when it's just an empty space. There's no world there. And these are of equal duration, these four segments. Then the second is what's called the unfolding kappa. This is when the world system is coming into being. The various layers of the world system are generated out of the karma of beings from previous world systems that have expired. When a being dies, if they're not fully enlightened, there's karma and cravings still extant, and it's still an energy to take a new birth. But in an empty kappa, there's no place to be born. So the accumulated karma of all the beings from the previous kappa generate the worlds. So by the force and power of their collective karma. And this, I would say, is the only time we see in the Buddhist texts any idea of collective karma, is in the generation of a world system. And it's generated from the top down. So first the various Brahma levels come into being, then the various sensual heavens, then the earth, and then the lower realms. So it's generated from the top down. Then the next sub kappa is the stationary kappa, or the steady kappa. This is, the world is now formed, and humanity and the animals live on this in this world system. And we talked about last time how humanity is said to go through 18 Antara kappas, of up and down, of very long lifespans to very short lifespans. And this all occurs in this one segment, this one fourth of the Mahakappa. This is the life of humanity. And at the very end of this period, if the world is to be destroyed by fire, and I'll get into that because there's different ways the world can be destroyed, but we only have a detailed description of the fiery end, which is what is expected this time around. There'll be a great rainfall followed by a long drought that lasts 100,000 years, and all the living beings in the world die during the drought. So everything's dead. It's now a dead world. And the last segment of the kappa is the infolding kappa. It's when the world comes to destruction. The physical structure of the world is destroyed. All the beings have already perished. And the world can be destroyed by fire, by water, or by wind. And there's a pattern that repeats over an even greater cycle. It's 64 Mahakappas to complete a great cycle. First, there are 7 destructions by fire, followed by 1 destruction by water, making 8. Then there are 7 of these cycles repeat. And then in the 8th cycle, the last destruction is by wind. So once in every 64 times, there's a destruction by wind. So most of the destructions are by fire. And fire destruction is the only one we have a detailed description of how it occurs. And the root text for this is the Sata Surya Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. It's the Sutta of the 7 suns. And it's quite clear from the text that the reason the Buddha gave this discourse was not just for the interest of the theoretical description of the end of the world, but to make a point in the teaching of impermanence, that even this world system, even Mount Sindaru, even the great ocean, they'll all be consumed. The ocean will be dried up and Mount Sindaru will be burnt to ash. So even these things that most contemporaries would have taken as symbols of stability and permanence, they too are impermanent. So how much more impermanent is our ordinary existence? But then we get a lot more detail about the whole story in the commentaries, and also in the Abhidharma Kosha, which is a Sarvastivada text. There's further details. What happens is that over a long period of time, the sun multiplies. You start with the ordinary 1 sun, then you get 2, 3, all the way up to 7 suns. And each time the heat is increased and it dries up all the rivers and so on. And finally, burns up the entire world. Even Mount Sinnaru is reduced to ash, and there's nothing left. There's an interesting footnote in Poussin's translation of the Abhidharmakosha, where he talks about, I'm just looking for it so I can, I'm looking for it in my copy here. He talks about how the explanation for how these seven suns come to be, and he says that there were different theories that were discussed of how you could have seven suns, where the seven suns came from. One of the theories is that the suns, the additional suns, exist in some kind of other dimension or other plane and don't only become manifest in this world at that time. And one of the theories is that when they say seven suns, they actually mean the single sun expands to 7 times its diameter, which is an interesting correlation to the modern view that the end of the solar system will out of and expands greatly and consumes the inner planets. So there was quite a bit of discussion in the text about this. Also, various debates back and forth about what happened to the hell beings. Some said that they didn't perish if their time in hell was not finished, but they were transferred to the hell in another world system. Now, this level of destruction begins at the human level or the earth level, and the fire burns up one by one all the sensual heavens as well, and also the first Brahma level. So the destruction goes that high. The destruction by water, there's a massive flooding that consumes, and it's not ordinary water, it's like caustic water. It's like very alkaline water that dissolves everything. That goes up even higher, and then the sensual heavens, then first Brahma level, and the second Brahma level as well. So that means we're now seeing a destruction of multiple Chakawalas. It's a huge area being destroyed. And thousands and thousands of world systems are all dissolved in this caustic water. The destruction by wind that only occurs once every 64 Mahakappas results in tremendous winds that blast and destroy everything. And this reaches as high as the third Brahma level, and causes a description of the windstorm blasting apart all these Chakawalas as the various Mount Sinnarus from the different world systems are uprooted and they're flung around and crash into each other and pulverized to dust. So we have these different layers of destruction. Now there's some interesting points about this to mention. One is first thing I'll mention is that the fourth Brahma level is not destroyed at any time, and one of the commentaries talks about. It's maybe in the Abhidharmakosha, I can't remember exactly the source, but one of the later texts discusses this as a controversy of whether this violates the law of impermanence, and the answer is no, because you can consider the Wahapala level, the fourth Brahma level, as a unitary world. There are each Brahma has his own mansion, and those have a limited lifespan. But the world as a whole is really just an abstraction, as a collective noun to refer to this entire level. But none of these destructions reach that high. They reach up the worst reaches up to the destruction by wind reaches up to the third Brahma level. Now, in the Abhidharma Kosha, there's a discussion of how these destructions relate to the Brahma levels and the levels of jhana, which is quite interesting idea. The first Brahma level, equivalent to the first jhana, the coarsest factor remaining is sense desire is surpassed in first jhana, but there remains thought process, thought formation. And fire is the equivalent of, according to this text, is the equivalent of thought formation, because it burns up a being, it consumes a being. So the destruction by fire takes out all the sensual level plus the first Brahma level, first jhana level. Then you have destruction by water, and it says water can be considered equivalent of piti, which is rapture. And the Buddha actually, in one text, he compares piti and sukha using metaphors derived from water rushing up through from an underground stream is an analogy of piti. And piti remains the coarsest factor in second jhana, so the destruction by water takes out everything up to second jhana. And then the breath is only surpassed in fourth jhana, so it remains a coarse factor in third jhana, the physical processing of breath. So wind takes out everything up to third jhana level. There's another set of analogies that's occurred to me, comparing this history of the destruction of the worlds in the Buddhist model to the modern scientific model. And with a little imagination, you can see a parallelism. The destruction let's look at this the modern cosmological scientific model. There's a solar system has a lifespan, a galaxy has a lifespan, and then the universe as a whole has a lifespan. So the destruction of the different multiples of world systems follow this pattern. An individual solar system dies when its sun dies. And in the case of a yellow dwarf star like our sun, it will turn into a red giant. So that's very close to destruction by multiple suns. In fact, one of the old models had that as a theory, that it doesn't mean 7 separate suns, but one sun expanding 7 times. So the sun will burn up. The fire of the sun will destroy the solar system. Then the galaxy as a whole, we know our galaxy is a spiral galaxy with a massive black hole at the center. And that's why it takes that spiral form. It's like when you pull the plug in a bathtub and you see the water swirling around. Basically, the galaxy is going down the drain. It's being sucked into the black hole. It's circling around and being sucked into the black hole, and eventually it will be all consumed. So that's like destruction by water. It's very by metaphor or analogy, it's very similar to the physical process of pulling the plug in a bathtub. And the universe as a whole, uh, depending on the cosmological model, will is considered to be expanding, and eventually it'll just dissipate. And that's like destruction by wind. It's like the force of the Big Bang was the original wind and is blowing everything outwards. So we have these three levels of destruction that can be, with a little imagination, can be made parallel to the three levels of destruction in the Buddhist model. And finally, just to wrap this up, to make the final point that's important is to go back to the source of all this. The original source of all this is the Sattasarya Sutta, the Sutta of the Seven Suns. And it's quite clear that the Buddha didn't give it just as something neat to think about, but as a contemplation on impermanence. And that, I think that's part of an important part of contemplating impermanence, is to do it on different time scales. There's the impermanence of human life. That's contemplation of death, the fact that our existence on this world is impermanent. It has a beginning and an ending. Then there's the contemplation of impermanence on very fine grain, very short time span, which is the instantaneous arising and passing away of dhammas, which is what meditator focuses on doing vipassana. But it also can be useful, as the Buddha expounded in this sutta, to sometimes contemplate impermanence on greater time scales, greater than human, and to think that the continents move, the mountains rise and fall, the sun has a lifespan, even this everything that we feel, because it lasts longer than us and the change is very slow, we feel it as permanent and stable. It's all changing constantly at a different time scale. So there is nothing that's stable in this world for even an instant. Okay, so I'll stop there and I have a look at the chat, see what we got here. It looks kind of busy already. I'll scroll it back and see what. Okay, the first question here. We can propose true infinity as every possible phenomena that could ever occur spatially and temporally, meaning nothing else can be added to it, lacking nothing from this be interpreted that one, true infinity, specific location. Two, everything that could ever happen has already happened, and time and space are mere illusions created by mysterious force. The question, the whole reality of this experience is ours, is more like a dream or imagination. Three, just as the double slit experiment or Schrodinger's experiment, phenomena only manifest when observed, otherwise it is a cloud of limitless possibility, yet inherently empty. This further reinforces the idea that experience is created by a mysterious observer. Okay, so interesting thought there. Not really a question, but yeah, that's, I think, this idea that the infinity of space and time, that was definitely the Buddha himself. We always have to remember the Buddha himself refused to speculate about that. He said that's one of the things we don't know. We can't know if the world is finite or infinite. But the later Buddhist tradition definitely held that the universe is infinite. And the Buddha-Ghosa states that explicitly, that the number of Chekawalas is without limit, it's infinite. And that samsara is without beginning and without end. So this was very much not just a Buddhist view, but I think it's the inherent assumption of the ancient Indian worldview, uh, which is, it always fascinates me, the different conceptions of the world in different civilizations. And, uh, the Indian view is definitely this infinity of cycle after cycle, which does, as this commenter says, that does give a kind of dreamlike quality to the whole thing. Um, that it's all just round and round. Okay, let's go on here. How to deal with Vibhava Tanha, opposite of desire to become. That's a unique spelling, but I know what you mean. Vibhava Tanha. Vibhava Tanha, desire to become, or Bhavatana is a desire to be or to become. Vibhavatana is the desire not to be. And these are two very deep defilements in the mind. Uh, there are three kinds of tanha. There's the desire for sense pleasure, the desire to be, and the desire not to be. Uh, we tend to be bothered mostly by the sense desire level. It's the noisiest for us, but it's not the most deep. It's really relatively superficial compared to the other two. Um, Desire to be, and we all go back and forth between these. The desire to be, in its root or primordial form, is just a desire to exist, but it manifests as a desire to be something more than what you are, to be more famous or more powerful or richer, whatever that might be, but to be bigger than you are in some way. Desire not to be, in its extreme form, is self-destruction, but it manifests for all of us in milder or more common day-to-day form as just a desire to be less conscious. So because consciousness can sometimes feel like a burden, beings escape consciousness in various ways. They dull down their consciousness. An obvious way would be with alcohol or drugs, but also, watching stupid TV shows for hours on end, or just kind of oversleeping is another common one. Just various ways of throttling down consciousness. To deal with it, you just first of all you just have to recognize that's present, and that you don't have to succumb to it. Once it becomes conscious, then it loses a lot of its power. Does stream entry only make you see non-self, or do you also see the deathless element? Um, there is, at stream entry, there is an entry into, or a glimpse of, nibbana, but it's at that stage of stream entry, it's not a full penetration. It's just it's like the curtain parts for a moment, and oh yeah, there is an unconditioned, and that's what allows the understanding of not self. That's where it comes from. Do we inherit this cosmology from Brahmanism? Yes, we do. There's uh, very similar ideas in pre-Buddhist Vedic tradition, and the Buddhist version is only one iteration of several that were present in India, but they all came from this very similar root, going back to Vedic times. Okay, here's another multiple commentary here. All things are rooted in desire. They come from being through attention. They originate from contact. They converge upon feeling. They're headed by concentration. Mindfulness exercises authority over them. Wisdom is their supervisor. Liberation is their core. They culminate in the deathless. Their consummation is nibbana. What does this list mean? It's from Anguttara 1058. Well, it's one of the Buddha's presentations of the path to awakening. He presents in different places. He presents. He looks at this process of awakening from different angles, and this one is a path of practice beginning by looking at samsara, and then as he says in point 6, sati exercises authority over them. So once you see the process of samsara with sati, and then you can get beyond it. Okay. There we go. Next one. Can you comment on immoral enlightened people? I saw the four great kings, four orange orbs in the sky only once. Do they survey the world for morality, and how does that relate to nibbana? Well, the four great kings are, they are said to serve, to tour the world and check on the morality of beings. It's not directly related to nibbana. It's the four great kings are not themselves enlightened beings. They're still in samsara. They're devas of the lowest sensual heaven. When you say you saw the four great kings, four orange orbs in the sky, I wonder if you remember, was that on a full moon or a new moon day? Because those are the days when it's said in the text that the four great kings make their tour. What is the relationship between a mahakappa and an aeon? An aeon is a common translation for mahakappa. So it would be the same thing. Mahakappa is the Pali name, and a lot of books will translate that as an aeon. It seems like Buddhist cosmology has the job of loosening the girders and boundaries of the mind. Yes, it does that. I mean, you have. I think it's a bit difficult for us moderns to really put ourselves into the imaginative space of that cosmology, because we have now, through through our instruments and our a model of the universe that's quite different in some ways, but that wasn't known in ancient India, and it's again, I get back to this, the difference. I think the fair comparison is not between ancient Buddhist model and the modern model, but between ancient Buddhist model and ancient Western model, like the Greeks and Europeans. And there we see a very, very different approach. Now, the approach in the West wanted to contain everything, so it's not loosening up the mind. It's creating a boundary. It's a very narrow, small universe, really. It's small in time and small in space, whereas the Indian model blows it all open. Everything is vast and multiples of this and that, and everything's in thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. multiple world systems and vast regions of space and time up the mind. I've heard of contemplation of devas. Do people also contemplate asuras, brahmas, and formless beings in the same way? Well, I wouldn't recommend contemplating asuras. They're sort of demonic. But yes, brahmas and formless beings. You can take the meditation on devas all the way through the Brahma worlds and the formless levels as well. And Guru 4173 says that to say there is, isn't, both, and isn't, neither is nor isn't anything other than the five aggregates, papanchasis and the pancha. Can you explain what this means? Yeah, it means don't get caught, don't get tangled up in thought conceptions. If you're trying to understand the subtle Dhamma, you're not going to get very far if you're trying to iron out definitions and figure things out and put them in a box. That's a very narrow left-brained way of approaching it. So papancha is in proliferation. It's the mind making stories and analyzing in an intellectual way. And nipapancha means it can't be done. It's beyond papancha. So you try and cultivate an intuition about the Dhamma and not an intellectual understanding. It is interesting that you bring up a little science in regards to the universe. What do you think of the scientific view of hard determinism? There's no free will at all. I don't hold to that. I think there is such a thing as free will. And that consciousness is ultimately free. So I don't think there's a hard determinism. And even on the material level, the Buddhist view is there's no really randomness. But I think that doesn't mean that things are determined in that hard way or the narrow way, because there is probabilities. Probability is not randomness. There's a range of probabilities for every occurrence. So it's kind of a fuzzy determinism, I'd say. At the end of each kappa, will humans go extinct and then evolution will happen all over again? Yes, all beings are destroyed, and then the whole cycle has to start over again from scratch. My question is, what is the nature of this mysterious observer exactly? Yeah, that's the chitta, and that's a whole big, huge topic. Well, and that's really I would say one of the main themes of Buddhism is what is the mind? You can approach that from many different angles. Is a monk allowed to live completely solitary, having no human contact? No, not in Theravada Buddhism, because we have to take our alms food every day. So I think that was deliberately set up by the Buddha to prevent that exact scenario, because he knew there'd be a tendency of monks to want to go off into solitude, and then they wouldn't be in contact with the lay people. They wouldn't be of any benefit to the world. Okay, maybe I'll just take one or two more and we'll call it. Somebody says, since taking interest in Buddhism, I started using numbered lists in my life, and this is great. Yes, then a lot of people notice that, how the Dhamma is arranged in all these numbered lists. Dear Ajahn, taking anti-parasitic medicine to intentionally kill parasitic beings, such as worms or insects, Uh, Living beings may put one's life in danger, but all definitions breaking the first precept. Okay, yeah, this comes up sometimes, and try to not be such a purist about it, because uh, this is a messy world, and sometimes it's not possible to keep any of the precepts absolutely purely. We should try, but um, a lot of the actions we take in the world are mixed karma. If you take medicine to kill parasites, your intention is to save your own life, um, and the killing of the parasites is incidental to that. Um, and the best way to minimize the negative karma is to focus on that positive aspect. I'm taking this medicine for my own health and well-being, out of compassion for my own being. And if this ends up killing a bunch of other lesser beings, then such as it is, and it's not. It's there's still some karma attached, but it can be lessened. Okay, I think I'll call it there for today, and we'll